so much of what I've been learning is on the webinars I've been doing with faith-based organizations. By the end of the call, they're saying, "Who do I call? I didn't know that could help. We would love to be part of this. We've been trying to figure it out how to do it for years." So a lot of it is just even knowing that it's an option for them to participate.
Hi again, everybody. Welcome back to the Narrative Podcast. Mike Andrews, joined today by Troy McIntosh from our Ohio Christian Education Network, and we're converting this to a Cleveland Guardians fan podcast as of today.
So yeah, we can use all the help we can get.
We just need a therapy session. So it's essentially what we
Starting pitching,
well, maybe more offense too. Just not good. No, but seriously, we're going to talk school planting today because it's back to school time, and just thought it was a great opportunity to get you on the podcast, Troy, to talk about all things that are going on with the Ohio Christian Education Network right now. And it's a super exciting time because you've already attended 2 school openings this week, and there are more in the pipeline for the start of the school year. Exciting stuff.
Yeah, obviously back to school time at OCEN is always an exciting time, but particularly this year because there are 7 new Christian schools and Christian schools that are getting their charters for the first time across the state. Yesterday, we were up in Van Wert for the launch of a brand new school there, Kingdom Connections Academy. They had 19 students across 4 grade levels, I believe. This morning, we were in Marion at Berean Christian Academy. Just a little micro school there with 3 grade levels and 8 students.
Wow.
But, and then later today, Dave is heading to Zanesville for a new school that's opening with a brand new charter. So it's exciting to see these. This is one of the most satisfying things that I experience in my role at OCEN, is the knowledge that these kids that, would otherwise have a very negative experience in their education are now able to get really a life-giving education that I think only Christian schools can offer.
Yeah, it's been exciting to see photos coming back from the different events, the excitement on the kids' faces. You can see the parents are visibly relieved that this is an environment that they get to put their kids in. It's just so neat to see those pop up in the smaller communities throughout the state.
And then even this past Saturday, I was at a back-to-school blast that Columbus Christian Center was hosting here on the east side of Columbus, and they're our host church for Crown Prep Academy, which a lot of people know we launched 2 years ago as our second OCEN school launch. And 2 years ago, Crown Prep started with 11 students, and they will be opening in September with at least 69, with a few more people who have expressed interest. So it's same thing with West Side Christian, which was our first school plant on the west side of Columbus. They're seeing growth. They've outgrown their current facility. They have a new facility they're looking to move into. We see the same thing at West Side Christian on the west side, which was our first school plant. They've outgrown their facility. They have a new facility they're ready to move into. They've got to do some renovations and so forth there. But just the growth of Christian education across the state is something nobody would have predicted 5 years ago. I was at Lake Center Christian on Monday, which is up in Hartville. And in the past 5 years, they've had over 50% increase in students. They're up to 990 students. Just under 1,000. When I left Worthington Christian, was a school I was at just 4 years ago to join OCEN, there was one Christian school in the state that had 1,000 students, and by our best count now, we're close to 10 that are at 1,000 or right at 1,000 or more. So we're just seeing tremendous growth. People are showing an interest in it. And I think they're kind of rediscovering the important role that discipleship plays in through an academic program in a child's life.
Yeah, and it's caught the attention of some other states. As we talked briefly, David and I, last week about the Christian Education Network expansion that's going national. There are some other state leaders that came in last week to start that process. Tell us a little bit about that, just the meetings and the possibilities of seeing this OCEN model expand into other states nationwide.
Yeah, so one of the things that we were seeing as I was, interacting with Christian school leaders from other states is I was describing to them what I was doing now, and almost every time I would talk to them, they would say, we need something like that in our state. And so that was the genesis of this idea of replicating the Christian education network that we have in Ohio across all 50 states. This past week, we hosted representatives from 3 states that were interested in creating a Christian education network in their state. They're very interested. It was kind of an onboarding meeting with them. We've got at least 2 others that we hope to launch by the end of this school year by the end of this calendar year for a total of 5. And then other states are starting to call us as they're hearing. I received a call from Alaska just a couple days ago.
You're going to go hunt some moose?
I said, we need a road trip. I was thinking, can we rent an RV and make a road trip all the way up to Juneau? So it's just, indicative of this renewed interest in Christian school education for kids.
And some of it's due to the landscape that's been created by the Trump administration. That's going to be part of our conversation today with Laurie Todd-Smith, who's in the education side of the Trump administration. But when you see the One Big Beautiful Bill and some of the tax incentives that it's offering to school choice and to Christian schools, like it's making this a ripe time for schools to start.
So the growth of the school choice movement is one of the big stories in it. It's probably the biggest story in education over the last 5 years. So we've seen it in Ohio with the expansion of the Ed Choice program via the backpack bill that we were big advocates for. We've seen it in the tax credit scholarship program that's been available for Ohio. But probably the biggest news of the last 4 to 6 months in this space was the passage of the reconciliation bill, the big beautiful bill, if I have to call it that.
You do.
It contained a provision that for the first time authorized a federal school choice program through a federal tax credit to donors who give to a scholarship granting organization such as ours. So the way it works is beginning in January of 2027, an individual could make a contribution to our scholarship granting organization and receive up to a $1,700 federal tax credit, dollar for dollar, from their gift. So the important thing here is it's a tax credit and not a deduction. So it's much more tax incentive, much bigger tax incentive than just a normal gift to a nonprofit, because it's a reduction in your taxes. You get all of that money back. So it's essentially a gift that costs that individual nothing. So for a married couple who files jointly, that would be a $3,400 contribution that they could make to our SGO and essentially receive it all back when they file their federal taxes.
Yeah.
You stack that on top of the Ohio tax credit, which is up to $1,500 for a couple, and an Ohio couple could make a contribution of $4,900 to our SGO, receive all of it back. I mean, that's the amazing part of this. They get all of it back, and then we take that and turn around and give it to, in the form of scholarships to students who attend our member schools. So essentially, two couples who make such a gift could fund almost the entire year education for a worthy student at a Christian school who would otherwise not be able to financially find that accessible.
Yeah. And you either write your check to the government or you write your check to get kids out of public schools and into these.
You're paying that money either way. It either goes to Uncle Sam and the State House here in Columbus, or it's going to go to kids who are going to attend Christian schools.
Yeah. Don't write that check just yet, though, from the national perspective. As Troy said, January 2027 is when that goes into effect. So just wanted to make sure we got that.
But you can give access to the state credit.
Yes.
You go to OCEN.org and click on the SGO link. You can make gifts now and receive the state tax credit. And this year, for this school year, we're planning to give out over $4 million in scholarships to students at our schools.
Yeah. And I can attest personally, it is as easy as it sounds. I literally sat down with our accountant this year and he said, hey, here's what your tax bill is for the state of Ohio. And I said, well, wait just a second. What if I do this and I literally went on SGO, made the donation, gave him the receipt, and my tax bill went away.
Yeah, it's a 5-minute donation process. You'll get emailed a tax receipt. You claim it on line 15 of the schedule of credits, attach your receipt to your return, and that's literally all you have to do.
Yeah. And as great as Ed Choice has been for this expansion of school choice, there are still people out there who don't like it, Troy. And you got to go, I don't want to say head to head, but you had a rebuttal for somebody out in, I believe it was the Sydney Daily News, who just repeated the same tired arguments about Ed Choice and what the program does, how it robs from public schools. And you had a really great rebuttal that just attacked those myths one last time. And I think it's worth mentioning on the podcast as well. That
Yeah. So there was a column that was written about 2 or 3 weeks ago from a local gentleman who I think writes frequently for the Sydney Daily News. And he was a rather vocal opponent of the Ed Choice Scholarship Program here in Ohio, and used a lot of the same arguments that Ed Choice and school choice opponents have been using for years, that it's robbing public schools and public schools are going to be harmed by this, and his neighbors are going to end up paying for your private school education. And none of that's true, particularly the aspect of, he closed his article with a line that I'm going to send my kids to public schools and my neighbors can keep their money. They don't have to pay for, my grandson's education. Well, he neglects to tell you his neighbors are paying for his grandson's education one way or the other.
right.
They're either going to go to the public school or they're going to get a scholarship to attend the school of their choice. So, there are certainly opponents to school choice programs out there, although the polling consistently shows that in the rank and file voter population, super majority support for school choice programs. And so we just think and continue to advocate for it because we think it's the greatest reform action that state and federal governments can take in education.
Well, we'll make sure to link to your letter in response to that column in part of the show notes. And we're going to continue our back to school bash in just a moment, talking with Laurie Todd-Smith, who's the Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Office of Early Childhood Development. She's our special guest today, coming up next on The Narrative. Hey, Narrative listeners. Christians in the marketplace today face more unique and challenging threats than ever before. Businesses are following woke capitalism, chambers of commerce are beholden to social justice, and secular activists are chipping away Christians' First Amendment rights. As Ohio's only Christian Chamber of Commerce, the Christian Business Partnership stands in the gap to advocate for, to educate, and to celebrate Christian business owners. Joining the partnership also allows businesses to provide their employees with healthcare insurance, workers' compensation, and exclusive banking and educational discounts. To find out more and to join, go to cbpohio.org. That's cbpohio.org. And we're back on The Narrative. Mike Andrews and Troy McIntosh, joined now by Dr. Laurie Todd-Smith, who's the Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Office of Early Childhood Development at the Administration for Children and Families at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It is so great to have you on the podcast, Laurie, to talk about all things education here at the start of the school year. Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's start a little bit broad. When you look at the state of American education today and we see test scores are plummeting and parents are disengaged or maybe even disenfranchised with their educational options, there's political tension in the classroom. What do you believe is at stake for the next generation?
That is a really big question to start with. There's a lot going on there. You mentioned declining test scores. We have skills gap going on with our high school graduates. We have a lot of political divisiveness right now. We have teacher shortages, but all of those things really impact us as a whole nation, ultimately. And things that stand out to me that I think are important for people to know when we talk about test scores. The most recent data shows that only 31% of our fourth graders can read proficiently in fourth grade and only 30% of eighth graders. And 40% of those kids are not even at the basic level of reading. And math scores are just as low. And low income students are struggling more than middle to high income families. So I think there's even a school district, Baltimore City Public Schools, reported that 63% of their middle and high school students were failing at least one class. And this is the worst one, I think. Sorry to start with such a negative, but 23 schools in that district have absolutely zero students scoring proficient in reading and math. So 23 schools times whatever number of children are in those schools aren't reading. That's a very alarming statistic. And additionally, if you look at it from the perspective of teachers, I'm a former classroom teacher myself for many years in Arizona, New Mexico, and Mississippi. There are 400,000 classrooms nationwide right now that are either vacant or filled by educators that do not meet state certification standards. So basically relying on substitute teachers to fill this teacher shortage going on. And the shortage is really related to special education, which is such an important time to help young children. So all of those dismal results lead to a poorly educated workforce, a lack of engagement in civic engagement in our future, and really do not prepare the next generation for what's ahead of them to be successful. So it is a perfect time under the leadership of President Trump, and I couldn't be more proud and honored to be in a role to try to take a stab at trying to help in these really important topics. So a lot at stake and a lot of room to grow.
So, Laurie, everything that you just described, leads so many parents to recognize we're really in an educational crisis in a lot of ways. And I think parents are seeing that with their own children and the progress that they're making. And a lot of parents are feeling closed out, shut out of the educational system. And that's why we've seen so many of the tensions and conflicts arise between parents and school boards more recently. What reforms do you think are most needed or would be most beneficial to make the system more accountable to the families it serves?
Yeah, that's a great question. And after my 30 years plus of working in this field, it is one of the if there's a good side to COVID happening, it's a good side that parents got so involved and saw for the first time what was really happening in those schools. And to see an administration like we have right now really focused on giving education back to the parents. So the first reform that you've probably heard about is downsizing the Department of Education. It started in 1980. Some refer to it as a failed experiment. It started under the Carter administration, and I think the goal was to help children in more ways. We've poured millions of dollars, billions of money into that system and added a lot of jobs at the Department of Ed and added a lot of money to the Department of Ed. And we are now at a 30-year low of student outcomes. So I think we can say it's fair that whether it's an experiment or however we want to look at that, it didn't work, and our children didn't make the gains that it probably intended to, and a lot of adults benefited from it. So we also can look at the $190 billion in COVID money that went out to the states for education, and we're still at a 30-year low with our data and outcomes. And so I think there's a lot of changes with the downsizing, ultimately the elimination of the Department of Ed, that will really return the intent of the funding at the federal level to the families that need it the most. So there's a book called, and I printed this quote so I could read it. It's called Education is at a Crossroads. And it says, the federal government should only play a limited role in education. It should serve at the state and local levels as research and statistics gathering agency in disseminating findings that enable states to share best practices. Local educators and parents should be empowered to teach their children with effective methods and adequate resources without federal interference. And parents must once again be in charge of the education of their children. And I just love that quote. That sort of sums it up for me, that returning funds to states and letting them be the decision makers, as parents are the child's first teacher and their best teacher. I have never met a parent in my 30 years of working in this field that did not want the best for their child, and I've worked with all different types of families. So I'm really excited that Linda McMahon, Secretary McMahon, is very focused on empowering states, increasing school choice, and returning education to the states. And I have some, experience in Mississippi too, with some of the bills that we passed during my time there that really point to. I can remember us trying to pass school choice for the first time in Mississippi when I worked as an education advisor to the governor for 8 years. And we tried a couple times, and there was one day that all the parents showed up at the Capitol with their children, pulled them out of school. Our Capitol was filled with parents and children, and we actually were able to pass school choice for the first time in the state with all of those parents guiding us through that process. So it was very powerful visual to me about the power of parents and how involved they can be when they need to fight for their children's rights. So very, very much think that returning that to the states, letting the federal government provide information to states and best practices and a supporting role, more of a customer service role, would really enhance. And that's coming from my lens of a state perspective, less now in the federal role. But I can see it every day in the new job I'm in right now. Everyone, and I love the people in my office, but they're so used to making rules for states to follow. And I keep saying, why? You know more about Mississippi than we do? Or really? No way you do, and really trying to get them to understand that states do what they do best, and they know best how to implement that in their states.
Yeah. So one of the best descriptions of the Department of Education that I've heard is they take money from states in the form of tax dollars, scrape off a chunk off the top for administration, and then send it back to the states with a bunch of strings attached. It just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And one more statistic I forgot to mention, when we think about education, and I was a teacher, so I always looked at this differently, like, we need more money in teaching in Mississippi. We need more of this. We need more of that. The national statistic is that only 47.5% of all K-12 personnel are teachers. 47.5%. So when we talk about education, we always think, but teachers are doing the godly work, and they are. Uh, but we're talking only 47.5% of all the personnel in public K-12 are teachers. So a lot of, I'm not saying there's not supports needed. There's a lot of other supports, but it's so administration heavy now, and less about the classroom and the teacher, and he or she are the ones that can make the real difference in a child's life. So interesting numbers.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned your experience in Mississippi. I'd love to drill down on that just a little bit, because from what I understand, that maps really well to some of the statistics you gave us about the reading and math test scores. So I know it was called the Mississippi Miracle. Can you talk a little bit about the growth that you saw in the reading and math scores and how such a remarkable turnaround happened?
Yeah, this is my favorite question of all the ones you have asked so far, only because I'm immensely proud of it, and it taught me so much about. We call it a miracle, but I believed in miracles before. But if you picture a state that was dead last in education on every ranking in 2013, articles were written about my home state that said, thank God for Mississippi, because if you lived in Alabama or Arkansas and you were always at the bottom of the list, you could be sure that Mississippi was always going to be below you. And so thank goodness Mississippi's always there to be 50th. We are a state that had persistent achievement gaps. We had low graduation rates, high dropout rates. Only 33% of children were reading proficiently. We are also still the state with the most children living in poverty and dead last in education nationwide. And if you ever had told me back in 2013 that I'd be on a podcast with you talking about now leading the nation in reading scores, I would have kind of laughed and said, we can only hope and pray. Well, we did hope and pray. We implemented some really amazing reforms, and we are now leading the nation. We're number 9th in education rankings. We went from 50th to 9th. And the last data I saw, well over 90% of our children were passing their reading assessment. So it has been deemed now the Mississippi Miracle, but there's some really important reforms that went into place. It really wasn't magic, but it was a commitment to using data to inform our practice. It was a commitment to using a universal screener in all of our classrooms. We retrained every kindergarten through 3rd grade teacher in the state of Mississippi. We put in reading coaches into the lowest performing schools, and they taught our teachers how to use data to inform practice and used something called the science of teaching reading, which is basically getting back to the basics of reading and focuses on phonics and word sounds and some really basic elements that used to be used back in the day when I was a young child. So we put in a lot of efforts and used data. I can't reiterate enough. And leadership. A lot of states have been asking us, how did you do the Mississippi Miracle? How did this come to gains? We started seeing gains as early as 2015. And the NAEP data, which is the nation's report card, it's the only apples to apples comparison. Data comes out every 2 years. We saw gains in 15, 17, 19. We really worried after COVID it wouldn't happen. We still remained our competitive gains. And then the last round of data, which was released in the 2024 data, there's now 2 states that are leading. It's Louisiana and Mississippi in growth in 4th grade reading. So the southern states have something going on here. But it really was a great lesson in leadership of our legislature and leaders of the state, as well as tracking real progress. And back to families again, I think everybody underestimates that. But if I had to pick one thing, even though I look at it through the research lens, I think families and parents are really what made that impact. The awareness around reading. I could be shopping in a grocery store and having small talk with the cashier asking me about education, and she or he would say, my child got a note home that they might be at risk in their reading, so we're reading every night at home. Everybody was talking about reading because it was so predominant in the media. So it was a great story. Governor Bryant and I are actually working on a book about it right now, and should be out soon. But it's something that I think a lot of us could learn, and there's not one magic trick. It goes back to letting states do what they do best. And I will add, not a drop of federal funds were infused in that miracle. We used our own state data. We used our own policies. We drafted our own legislation, and our legislature supported it over the years. So with state funds. So more evidence that we just need to get out of the way of states. What they know how to manage this best.
Yeah. As a former elementary teacher, I was schooled in my graduate training so much in the whole language approach to reading. And you mentioned Mississippi's use of science of reading, which was a very different approach to reading. And recently, Ohio has mandated that all public schools revert to the use of science of reading in their literacy instruction. So would you say, like, was that a critical component of what happened in Mississippi, or is there some other reform that you would suggest that Mississippi used that could be applied nationally that other states would be able to take advantage of?
Yeah, I think if you just do the science, and you must be around the same age as I am, because in my undergraduate to become a teacher, I learned the whole language approach, and I'm worried I helped contribute to a whole generation that no longer knows how to spell because I didn't. Even my own daughter, I remember sort of approaching some of that, and she's a terrible speller now. So the science of teaching reading and those components are really important. That's a great first step. But I also think to translate that to other states, if you only do that one component, and I'm a faculty member now at a university, or you are, and you and I learned the whole language approach, you and I don't really know. You might have had more training since then. I have gone back to some, but we might only know what we learned in college. And so we are now teaching future teachers an older strategy that is not what they need to know the science of teaching reading. So this whole holistic approach, we also we tested every kindergarten through third grade teacher, and then eventually got the faculty on board to take that same assessment. And if you weren't at a certain level of understanding on it, you did more of the online letters training we implemented, and it was over a summer course that you could use. And then we got every professor that teaches early literacy in the higher ed world to use the same syllabi and the same book. And so our graduates feeding the next generation of teachers all came forward and are now teaching in the public schools that have that experience as well. I think the leadership piece is widely underestimated. Governor Bryant, I remember I was his education advisor for 8 years. I remember the headlines were, Governor, the legislature's going to fail 5,600 children from third grade because we had a reading gate that went with it. Um, Parents say there must be a better way. Children are going to fail. He said, I'm going to wear a badge with that number that says 5,600 on it to our next meeting. And I was saying, no, 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 don't do that. That's not a great idea. But he stood up and was unwavering in his support of this work moving forward and stopping the promotion of children who couldn't read. The accountability piece that I've talked about, the assessment, everyone using the same assessment as they entered kindergarten, parent engagement back and forth. 3 times a year, parents get letters home before they get to the end of third grade, telling them activities they can do at home. Investing in teacher quality, we raise the bar. If anyone's interested, I can share more about the components of our legislation that I think led to the student success. But I think the science of teaching reading is very important, but there's other elements, and states are so different that they might find it works different in their state too. But I think that whole state approach is what really led to the bigger success.
And part of that approach, it sounds like in Mississippi, was the implementation of school choice. We're big school choice proponents here. Troy actually was at a school opening this morning from some of OCEN's work in starting schools in churches. So we love that. And I know that the Trump administration has been such a champion of school choice. So can you give us a sense of exactly how much progress we've seen in expanding school choice in states? And then second prong of that question is, in your role with the Office of Early Childhood Development, are there school choice options on the early childhood side as well?
Yeah, great questions, and something I feel very passionate about as well. In my last role, so I worked in the Trump administration, the first Trump administration. Then I left to go and worked at America First Policy Institute here in Washington, D.C., where I led 2 centers, one, the Center for Education Opportunity, and another for the Center for the American Child. And Brooke Rollins, who's now our USDA secretary, gave me some of the best advice because I love so many parts of education. And she said, let's do one focus and do it really well. And so we really honed in on this school choice piece. And I had the opportunity to draft a lot of research and work in a lot of states, providing testimony and expertise about the benefits of school choice. So when we started that work, at the time we had 0 states with universal school choice. We now have 17 different states that have universal school choice, which I think is tremendous. There are 8,000, I had to write this down, 8,150 charter schools now across the country, serving more than 3.7 million students. We have 24 voucher programs in 18 different states that serve over 805,000 students. And there are 22 tax credit scholarship programs in 18 states that serve around 300,000 students. So the private school choice movement is expanding rapidly, and I suspect we'll have even more in this upcoming year. States like Arkansas and Iowa have really completed their transition to universal school choice. Alabama, Louisiana, Tennessee, Idaho, Wyoming, I could go on, but such tremendous growth. But one that I'm most proud of too, or proud for, I should say, is the state of Texas. I think I worked every year that I was at America First Institute with members of the legislature in Texas, and they finally passed just this last session, in a special session, their universal program. And I am so proud that they were able to move that. It was a political and education battle, and great things coming to the state of Texas. So more states will be moving in that direction. And it's interesting when you think about school choice and you think about what we just talked about with all the money into public education, and you think about what parents know is best. It seems so logical, but the arguments, I almost sound cynical sometimes. I just don't understand at any point in time how someone thinks that that I would know more about what's right for your child, or you would know more than what's right for my child. And so, all of those arguments that I still hear, even though school choice started so many years ago, seem like really outdated arguments. And I'm so proud this administration is really focused on giving that back to parents. It's interesting because I love the K-12 world. A lot of my experience has been in the early childhood world. And the brain research between the ages of 0 to 5 is so important. And my office now, the Office of Early Childhood Development at Human Services, under the direction of Secretary Kennedy, we issue vouchers and certificates for poor families. They're called CCDF certificates. And we give out $12 billion in these certificates. We also give states $12 billion to run Head Start programs and early Head Start programs. And one thing that I thought you'd be interested in, these are the CCDF vouchers are for low-income parents, so they can go to work and receive quality childcare if they have a child under the age of 5. So they could enter job training or childcare. And in Mississippi, unfortunately, like the way it plays out is if your parents make 100% of the poverty level, you can only really go to the Head Start centers in your community because there are not a lot of options. If you make a little bit higher income than Head Start, you can use a CCDF certificate, but not all programs accept them. And in Mississippi, our church-based programs, in my opinion, are some of the highest quality programs, and not all of them accept certificate program children. And so they don't get access to that. And the middle to high income parents get access to those higher quality programs. But the research shows that the kids most in poverty under the age of 5 need the highest quality care. So I'm really driven in this new job to help. There are currently 7,550 faith-based childcare centers nationwide, and only 2,730 of them accept the certificates. So I would love to work with your experts and people and teams that work in the faith-based communities to see how we might be able to improve that, because it brings money to the church programs. It also brings regulations that I'm trying to work on deregulating and making it as easy as possible to accept those children. But that would give all parents, more school choice. And same with Head Start. We have 12% of faith-based organizations, I'm sorry, of our grantees are faith-based organizations. So many people might not know that churches can actually be a Head Start partnership, and that actually brings even more funding to a church organization and helps the children most in poverty, which I can't really envision anything more important than helping those most in need. So I think those are two ways. TANF money is another way, and pre-K programs can also partner with faith-based organizations, offering parents more choice so that you're not just stuck to your funding stream or your zip code.
Yeah. So obviously that's a priority for you.
Yes.
What are you finding are some of the hurdles and challenges to implementing those kind of programs that allow families to exercise choice and access programs, particularly for low income families?
Yeah, I think some of the hurdles, do you mean engaging the obstacles for churches more accepting certain offers?
Yeah, like what are just growing those choice programs for low income families that would allow them to access alternatives.
Yeah, yeah. So much of what I've been learning is on the webinars I've been doing with faith-based organizations. By the end of the call, they're saying, "Who do I call? I didn't know that could help. We would love to be part of this. We've been trying to figure it out how to do it for years." So a lot of it is just even knowing that it's an option for them to participate. I think faith-based organizations often have older church buildings and have the belief that their building won't be able to be certified to serve young children. I think that is another obstacle, but states can work with you on that, and there's funding available to help bring building structures up to code and things of that nature. Parents also often don't know, and so we've got to meet parents where they are at the pediatrician's office, at church, wherever they are, to let them know more about these options. Every state has something called a resource and referral program that's supposed to give parents all these options. I'm not sure how effective that is in all the states, so that's definitely something I'm going to be working on to help explain and advocate for. We've been having webinars. We followed President Trump's executive order. We put guidance out to states, and we've really been focused on how to raise awareness around that.
Well, Lori, you've been so generous with your time, and so I want to make sure that we're respectful of it. But since we've mentioned the church a couple of times here as part of the solution, or at least an avenue to help with the educational crisis that we see throughout the country, I'm wondering if we could just close with what would you say to the general church in America? What would your appeal be about its responsibility to educate the next generation?
I would love to see, as I mentioned, more faith-based organizations participate in the child care subsidy program. I think the community approach, the ability that churches have, are best suited to meet the needs of their own communities, and that includes childcare, foster care, education. I can't think of a better investment a church could make than in their own community, in that of helping a child. So the healthy development of children lays the foundation for the future, and I've witnessed it. I also worked in the foster care space in my last role, and really saw how firsthand how churches, through the use of technology, are able to actually access a family in the community in need, and then have someone from the church meet that need, whether it be a crib for a newborn mom that might not be able to afford it, whether it be tutoring for a child who's falling behind. I think churches are best well suited. And, um, I think that's a critical role. And I think that's how education started. And we've come so far away from that. But if you think about it, returning education to states and letting churches meet the needs of their children and family is just a beautiful thing to me. I think that's uh, uh, the intent of education.
Yeah. Laurie Todd-Smith, so grateful again for this time today. This has been a very enlightening and encouraging conversation. So grateful to know that we've got an expert like you in the national department, in this administration, advocating for students and advocating for school choice. And we'll be praying for your work. And we thank you for your time today on The Narrative.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Narrative, presented by CCV and produced by Wessler Media. If you found today's episode insightful, leave us a review or rating and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. We're your hosts, Mike Andrews, Aaron Baer, and David Mahan, and we'll see you next time on The Narrative.